Okay, I wanted to make a little video about the stove. I don't know how much time I have on the video string here, so I'll try to make it fast. This is a Joe Tool stove. You'll notice that there's no, just right off the bat, that there's no fire protection in front of it. I'm going to talk a little bit about how to use it so it's safe. We never had any fire protection in front of it, like fireproof stone in front of it or anything, and you can do it safely that way, but I just need to show you how. And I'm going to walk through the stove a little bit and talk about its use. So just right off the bat, you can see it's got a front door. You take the latch open. This latch sometimes will need tightening. Well, I guess, oh, I know. Sorry. I was like, where do you tighten it? It's actually right here. There's a nut right here that holds this plate. You do not want to let this plate get loose because the door will not make a complete seal, and then you're going to end up with unintended air coming into the stove, and you might overfire it. Overfiring is a term I'm going to use a few times. It just means that the stove gets too hot, it develops cracks. And then the next step would be the fire department comes. So all these steps are, most of these steps are just intended simply to make sure that the stove doesn't overfire. So one of the things you could do is make sure with a wrench, not a pliers, but this is iron. It's very soft, so you do not want to take pliers to it. So you're going to get the right sized wrench and make sure that this is vertical and it's tight. This door comes off. You can lift this door off the hinges for cleaning. I have done it occasionally. This is for the flue. The stove tends to run cold until it doesn't. So I'll talk about that in a little bit. It tends to run cold, then it runs very hot, and I'll talk about that transition. But the flue, it's a little funky. You have to play with it a little bit to get it to go. This is wide open to the right. This is all the way closed. Generally speaking, just as a safety precaution, you don't want to run the stove with it like at night all the way closed because you develop a lot of creosote in the pipe. So, and you'll have to excuse the dogs. They see deer in the backyard. This is a clean out door, and you have a pan and you can empty that right in the backyard. I first brush all the stuff down through the grate like it is right now, and then once that's full, I clean it out. And I clean it out every burn. It doesn't take much for that thing to fill up. These knobs will loosen, and so you want to make sure that you get a Phillips screwdriver for these knobs and make sure they're tight, because you don't want one falling off when the stove is hot. And this is for the load. And so now I'm going to talk about the use of it. Well, let me talk about the painting first. This stove is about 15 years old. It's Norwegian. It was very expensive, but it does rust. It's a cast iron stove. I will post a link to Amazon to this video that has the paint, and you just take the paint and you dab it onto a rag and you spread it over the stove. You can clean it. You can clean the stove with a wire brush first to get the rust off of it, and then do the painting. So I paint it every year, actually. Okay, so now we need to talk about the safety. This is like the number one reason why I did this video, because this is a very enjoyable stove. Sometimes they can make the house so hot you have to open the windows in the winter time, but at the same time, you've got to follow some guidelines that the seller had shown to me. The first guideline is never ever run the stove with the glass door open. You never fill logs. If you've got a running stove, never use this glass door to fill the stove. The logs the previous owner did, and there was actually burn damage on the floor. We just got the floors redone. So you never ever open that. That door is only used for cold clean out. And that means cold means the next morning there's only very minor embers in there, and then you can use that to shovel the dust down into the grate for the tray and so forth. The second precaution is never run the stove with that door open all by itself, because it supercharges the stove, and you will absolutely overfire the stove. You can open it. In fact, I do open it frequently when I first start it, but I literally keep my hand on the knob. I don't go anywhere, and I'll leave it open for 30 seconds to a minute to get the fire to kick back up. But you cannot walk away with that open, and that's probably the most dangerous thing of all, is if you walk away with that door open and the fire starts developing up into the flue, and the flue overfires, and then all of a sudden you have a chimney on fire. So yes, you can use that by itself. You will be amazed at how hot the fire becomes, how fast it comes up. And the reason why I mention all this is it is a fussy stove. It runs cold in the beginning. It's a little tricky to get a fire going and get it like self-heated, and having that door open can help you do that. What you can do, and I do this frequently, is when you first have it open, you can run it with both those doors open. That you can do, and you can do that for probably 20 minutes. You might want to watch the side door because embers can pop out, and probably will, onto the floor. So you kind of want to be here when you're doing this, like attending to the stove. And so you can sort of play with it a little bit. Maybe close this all the way, and then keep the side open. But again, I can't stress this enough. Never, ever, ever open the front glass door with the stove having a fire in it. I think that's really it. Once the stove gets going, then everything gets sealed off. Of course, the flue is wide open. And then you keep loading wood back in through the side door, putting more wood in. And then you can even, once it really gets hot, once the cast iron itself starts getting red hot, you can start backing off the flue a little bit to about halfway down. And that's probably as low as I would go, is probably about half, maybe a little bit below it if it's maybe getting a little too hot. I think you're gonna love this stove. We bought it right after a hurricane came through, and then we had some trees that went down. This has a gas stove behind it, and what happened was, in fact, this is the key to the gas pipe. What happened was I had a full bore fire going, and all the heat was going up the chimney. The house was still freezing cold, and it was actually making the house colder because it was drawing in air from under the door, and the house I kept putting more and more wood in, and it had the gas assist, and the house kept getting colder and colder, and so the stove solved the whole problem. It really does retain a lot of heat. One thing I do is, you'll notice a lot of times the heat will all gather up into the upper loft. There is a switch, a reversal switch. Every year I switch this right there. Like it's set for summer now, where it's blowing down in the summer, and I just get on a stool or use a broomstick or something, and I set it to blow down in the summer. Well, in the winter, I reverse it. I turn it the other direction so it draws air up. And what happens when you're running the stove in the wintertime is you get all this heat developing up in the loft, up in these upper reaches. And then what I do is I have the fan pulling up the cold air up to the roof, and it creates this nice heat exchange with the upper elements, so that you get nice balanced heat throughout the house. The stove is probably my favorite thing to the whole entire house. I think you're going to have a lot of fun with it. You can start it with small starter logs. The full-sized ones that are like 12 inches long, maybe you can do it, but I think they tend to run a little too hot. If you cut one in half, you can probably do it that way. The starter logs are pretty helpful. You put a starter log in and then put some smaller pieces of kindling in with it. Again, you put it all in. You can put it all in through the front because it's cold. Make sure this is sealed tight. Pull on it, tug on it. When you light it, you can light it through here or even through the front. Close it and then start the fire with these two doors open. Again, you can close it a little bit and hold your hand on this one, or just somehow keep yourself from getting on the phone or something that's going to distract you. And then as soon as like a minute has passed, 30 seconds to a minute, either open this one back up or close this, and then kind of work it that way. That's it. I hope you enjoy it. I would love to have left a note. Maybe I'd like to talk to you about the gutters a little bit, because I think that's probably actually the first most important thing to talk about with the house. And I'll leave you a note about the gutters. But I hope you enjoy the house. I hope it gives you like a nice respite from Atlanta, from the compression in Atlanta. And we've been so blessed to have these almost past 20 years. Anyway, thank you. See you.